We're about to factor this trinomial by a process called decomposition. Now, there are faster ways to factor, which I have covered before. However, you do need to understand the fundamentals because, one, you might be asked to do it this way on your next math quiz, or because in upcoming math courses, you might need to use this concept for more complex examples. So again, factoring takes us from standard form to factored form, which kind of looks like this, where I know I'm going to have an x plus or minus something with a coefficient maybe in front of both of the x's and maybe not. So when we're factoring by decomposition, we want to break apart or decompose this middle value into two terms that add up to this middle term. And this is how you find them. The first thing you always do is you check if you can factor out greatest common factor out of all three terms. And in this case, I cannot. But you always check because it could actually make your life way simpler. After that, what we're going to do is we're going to take this middle number, or rather this middle term, and we're going to break it apart or decompose it in order to factor this trinomial partially. And this is what it looks like. The first thing I need to do is I need to multiply my first term and my last term. So 10, and you do this on the side. 10 times negative 3 is negative 30. And I'm going to find two numbers that multiply to negative 30 and add to negative 13. Now, as a little recap, if this number that I have to multiply to is negative, that means one of my numbers, one of my factors will be negative and one will be positive. And if this number that we have to add to is negative, then the bigger number, the bigger factor out of the two will have to be negative. Actually, you can just take a screenshot of that rule right here and look at it for later. So you're going to get really fast at this with practice, but because I'm a teacher, I like to write out all of my factors that multiply to 30 in order. So 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6, and I'm not going to keep going to 6 and 5 because then I'll just start repeating these numbers. And again, I know that the bigger of the two numbers has to be negative because once I add them, it has to add to negative 13. So I'm just going to add that negative to the bigger of the two numbers. Now I start checking which of these pairs of factors add to negative 13. And I know that you're skipping ahead and you can see which one it's going to be. But again, because I'm a teacher, I'm going to do it slowly. So it's not 1 and negative 30. Is it 2 and negative 15? Yes, it is. Bingo. Because 2 plus negative 15 gives me negative 30, negative 13. It's not 3 and negative 10, and it's not 5 and negative 6. So I know that the two factors that I'm going to break up this negative 13 is 2 and negative 15. So now I'm going to rewrite this expression, but I'm going to decompose this negative 13x into 2x and negative 15x. Okay, so far so good. Negative 10x squared. This one decomposes into 2x and negative 15x and then minus 3. So now this is called partial factoring. I'm going to break this up into two separate parts, and I'm going to factor each one of those separately. And by factor, I mean take out the greatest common factor. So if I look at this chunk, what is the greatest common factor here? The greatest common factor between 10x squared and 2x, well, the number part is 2, but I also have the x. So I can factor out 2x. And once I factor it out of just these two, what's left in brackets would be 10x squared divided by 2x is 5x, and this would be plus 1. So now let's look at these two terms. I have negative 15x and minus 3. What is the greatest common factor? Well, you could say it's 3, but it's actually negative 3. And in fact, whenever the first value is negative, I would just factor out that negative 3. Okay, so negative 3, and then what is left in brackets? So negative 15x divided by negative 3 is 5x, and negative 3 divided by negative 3 is positive 1. So once you complete the step, factor it partially, you need to have what's in brackets need to be exactly the same. It needs to be exactly the same. And if it's not exactly the same, that means you went wrong somewhere. Somewhere along here, you went wrong or you factored it out improperly, so you need to go back and do it again. And if that seems annoying, I get it. That is why we have other ways of factoring that are a little bit faster. But again, you need to understand this fundamental. So where do I go from here? Let me show you a quick example on the side. What if I asked you to factor this? 2xy minus 3y. And I asked you to factor out the greatest common factor. Well, you would see that the greatest common factor is y. And once you factor it out, you would have 2x minus 3. It would look like this. So in this case, this is basically the same thing, except for instead of y, I have this little expression in brackets that's the same. 5x plus 1 and 5x plus 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor it out or pull it out to the front. 5x plus 1 is basically that greatest common factor that you could pull out of this equation the same way we pulled that y out of this equation. Okay, and now what is left in the other brackets? Well, just like here, we have 2x minus 3 kind of going together in the brackets. I put these two terms, 2x minus 3, into the other brackets, and this is my final expression that has been factored. So I can say that once I factor 10x squared minus 13x minus 3, in factored form, that would be 5x plus 1 times 2x minus 3. So this is how you factor by decomposition. Yes, it takes a little bit longer, but really it's only 2 extra steps than the fast way of factoring, and you can get quicker and quicker. However, you need to understand this fundamental. This is the basics of why factoring works, the way that it works. Plus, in older grades, you will have to do this in a way that might not be as simple. So you do need to understand these fundamentals at the very least for your next math quiz. I hope this helps. Please let me know if you have any questions or any other tips you want to cover, and I will see you next time.